I spoke to you earlier about the importance of composition. In today's world, if you're just going to sell your paintings, composition, technique, and materials are really secondary or even further down from marketing and networking. So you have to view it in that light. If you're making a painting purely to sell, you're really going to have to do a lot of networking, a lot of marketing, you'll need support groups, and a lot of other techniques other than artistic techniques. Now, if you're going to make just purely art, you're going to need composition, good materials, good techniques. And of course, between those two extremes is marketing and selling art. And in light of that, that's the reason why I'm talking about composition. For a vast majority of painters, it's meaningless. For some of us, it does have significance. So we'll continue on. I want to tell you about a classic armature, a rectangle armature, simply because there's a lot of history behind it. You can make your own armatures, depending on your culture and where you're from. Some armatures are dictated to you. When you look at a beach scene, it's all horizontal. And you're going to go in, and just by nature of what you're looking at, you're going to make horizontal lines across your paper. And then you're going to put certain subject matters in certain places throughout there that you want people to focus on. And I told you in the third rule, you'd probably be a benefit for us Westerners to put it in those focal spots on that. And a lot of city scenes are a lot of vertical lines. And when you look at some of the Oriental ones, there's a lot of diagonal lines. This way, and this way, and this way. And of course, you can use circles. And it doesn't mean you just have to use one. You can use many circles of different sizes. You can interlock them. You can use squares. You can move them around. A lot of the old masters used the golden rectangles and various rectangles. And they did use circles too. And what I'm getting ready to show you, they would put many or numerous rectangles and pictures within pictures and use this armature that I'm going to show you within those. And then they would use it again. It got very complicated and very left-brain. And that's not to dismiss being a left-brain artist. Most of the people who came before us were. And there's a lot of good fine artists that are still that way. So I'll start that discussion. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to build on what I did on the third rule. And I'm just going to leave that armature there. And then I'm going to put the classical armature on top of it, and we'll discuss it as we go along. While I'm showing you this, I want to talk a little bit about the history of this. This classical armature came about a long time ago. As a matter of fact, it was Pythagoras that really started this thing. And we, as visual artists, are tied in very closely to the musical world and to mathematics. I mean, Pythagoras was a great mathematician. But as time went on, it evolved, and they developed this armature. This armature was used a lot. Now, you don't have to use the whole thing. A lot of the masters didn't. A lot of masters would add to it and subtract from it. And they would use it in various places throughout their painting. But I want to demonstrate the basic classical armature. The first thing we do is we divide our paper. We draw an X, basically, on our paper. From one point here down to the next point. Now, as you can see, I'm building on the third scroll armature that I told you about earlier. And this should be pretty close. Things should sort of fall in the line. As we go along, we'll see how it builds up on the third scroll armature. Okay, what you see here, it's a lot of artists use this, and they use it particularly for landscapes, where they say you come into the painting. Now what happens, and what you can do with this, there's just one part. You can use one part, then you can use the other part. But you can lay your subject matters along these lines. Like if you had a road, and there's another artist that developed another technique similar to this, and put your items along here. That doesn't mean that you can't collapse this V or expand a V. You can do that also. This is just purely the classical concept. Now, again, sometimes when this is explained, it gets very difficult and they get very mathematical about it. I'm going to make it as simple as possible. The next part of the armature we do, we come across halfway on the top and the bottom. And I've already measured this out. And we just draw a V. There's a lot of V's in this thing. To the corner. Halfway. And we do it again. Halfway. And we come to the bottom. And we do the same thing again. And while I'm doing this, you notice what's happening with the underlying one that I told you earlier about the thirds rule. Look where all the lines are starting to intersect here. Oh, look at that. You know, so, you know, there's a lot to be said about the simplicity of this. It's getting pretty complicated, you know, and you can see why a lot of the old masters sometimes would eliminate some of this stuff. But nonetheless, they would still use it. And there's even more to come yet. The next side, these sides here, you do the same thing that you just did with the other side. And sometimes when you see explanations, they're going to go into a lot of mathematical stuff. You really don't need to do that. It's all going to come out the same. And of course, I'm ruining this piece of paper here, but that's all right. These are watercolor pencils. And then I'm going to go over here and do the same thing over here. If you're going to tell a story, you can take many of these, put blocks of golden rectangles and square root rectangles. I know you haven't heard that before, but that's another term they use. And you see all these different focal spots. All these lines you can lay on. Whenever you look at a classical painting, you're going to find things like that. And you're going to find that they move around in circles. Notice how everything is still intersecting on the thirds rule focal spots. The last thing, to even finish this even more complicated structure out, is that we now come in and start connecting the middle ones with another line. And you can see that, and this just sort of rounds it out, you know. And you know, this is all based on music. I'm not a musician, never have been. I don't have the foggiest idea of what I'm talking about when I talk about music. I can only relate to what I've been told about this. And when Pythagoras was playing around with a piece of string, he developed chords, half chords, and quarter chords. And then the artists and the scientists over the years developed this armature from that concept. This is a chord, this is a half chord, and then you go down to whatever the rest of the chords are. But that's how it's developed out. And that's where this classical armature came from. It's really, you know, most artists today, in today's environment, would never entertain this. But you should know that a lot of the concepts and a lot of the things that we do, and a lot of the paintings that you see are based on the classical armature. I want you to notice where a lot of the focal spots are. This was the third rule that I did earlier. A lot of these lines intersect here, 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 right on those focal spots. Lay your area of interest across here, here. You can do all kinds of things with this. When you lay out a painting that you have in your head, when you see one that has a certain armature about it, you can move things around to line them up. You don't have to draw this. You can almost visualize it. But it's for me, it's really too complicated for most of my paintings for today. I still think about it and understand it, and you should too. I believe. I think it will help your paintings and your drawings. With that, I'm not going to do much more with armatures and composition. It depends on really where you're from and what you do and what pleases your eye. You'll see things that you say, well, it pops out at me, and that's what I use. Well, that's okay, but you've got to understand why it pops out, or you should understand why it pops out, because someday it's not going to pop out, and you might want to make it pop out. So this is the armature you can use. You're going to see L's in here. You're going to see most any of the shapes that you hear, particularly X's. I see a lot of X's, a lot of straight lines in here. I think rondo was the term they use. You can make round things out of these intersections here. You can put colors in various intersections. And that they do that a lot too. And you can even be more obscure and put some colors at the rather obscure intersections. And when you get the circular pattern going for you. Okay, I'm not going to do any more on compositions or armatures. I'm going to start dealing with more modern things later, things that were brought about to help you get from what you're looking at to your paper. Enjoy your painting. Hope it helped you.